Will gays go to heaven? And with that being said, I would like to add just a few biblical facts that most individuals may not be aware of about the Bible and some historical facts about gays as well. So, first of all, when we look at the Bible, most individuals would say that the King James Version is the most prized possession of the books out of all of them. However, when we look at the history of the King James Version Bible, we would also see that there is a huge history documented in reference to homosexuality. And by no means I am making this video because I want to bash, shame, or diss anyone in reference to being a part of the LGBTQ community. And in actuality, it's quite the opposite. I'm actually uh, in defense, if I may say, not, I mean, being a heterosexual male myself, however, there's some knowledge and information I think that most individuals should be aware of. So again, the King James Version Bible is usually acknowledges the most accurate and the most read and the most commonly used Bible amongst the Christian faith. And once again, I'm not here to discriminate or pick on or diss any individuals who may be of the Christian faith. I am just letting you guys know about some facts most individuals may not be aware of. So back to the King James Version Bible. Throughout history, we know that the King James Version Bible was produced and directed by King James the First. However, what most individuals may not be aware of is that King James the First was gay. Yes, I said King James the First, the director, the producer, the coordinator of the Bible was gay. And again, I am not here to bash anyone about being gay. However, I am here, like I said once again, more in defense because I do not like the fact that you have the pot calling the kettle black. Therefore, when we see most individuals in the religious community, be it pastors, preachers, ministers, most individuals would never ever bring this fact up in public. And for those of you, we have something called the internet. Just go online and look it up. You will find the facts, the information is there. There is no need for me to be sued for defamation of character because this is a fact. And like I said, a public fact, but you will not hear this being spoken upon in the public. So again, like I said before, King James the First was gay. And it is documented, well documented, that King James the First had a 14-year lover called Emis Stott. Again, Emis Stott, or MSC Stott, he was a Frenchman. I'm not quite too sure if I'm pronouncing it correct. I think it is ESME. It's me. I think that is how it's pronounced. But again, I'm not fluent in French, so I could be pronouncing it incorrect. But again, either way, the King James the First had a love affair of 14 years with a gentleman called Emis Stott. And Emis Stott was the first Duke of Lennox. And thereafter, the King James the First had a extremely deep love affair with another individual called George Villiers. And George Villiers was the first Duke of Buckingham. And this is well documented. Again, I am not here to bash anyone about being gay or their sexual preferences. I am here to address the fact that we have individuals in the spiritual community, pastors, preachers, and ministers who would condemn homosexuality, whereas the book that was inspired by God supposedly is written and not written but was inspired and directed by a homosexual. So I find that to be extremely, extremely nerve-wracking and disconcerting because, again, you have the pot calling the kettle black. So please, again, go online and look this information up, and you would see that is factual. And what makes this information even more, I would not say disturbing, because the King James had a right to his sexual preferences. And back then, at the time, as far as I'm concerned, homosexuality in the era of the King James time and before, homosexuality was extremely, extremely common and accepted. It was well documented and known that men of great caliber had young men doing sexual biddings and so forth and so on. So back then, the freak offs that we are seeing today is a joke to compare to what was going on back then, especially in our religious community. So back to my story. Again, the King James the first, who was the director of the Bible, producer, and the most loved Bible of them all, was gay. And again, I am not here to point a finger to say that him being gay is a problem. I am having a problem with those in the religious community who wants to disown or uh, disrespect, if I may say, or deny homosexuals or the LGBTQ community as not having a place in heaven. That is what this video is all about today. And I think, again, individuals should be aware of this because you would never hear this information spoken about in public or behind a pulpit. And why would a pastor not speak about this information? Why does the public does not know this information? After all of the years, we have held on to this book. And again, the book is nothing wrong with the book. I'm saying that we said that this book was inspired by God and was the word of God. But however, the person who was inspired to put the book together was a homosexual. So does that make God gay? I do not know. It's a bad joke, but it was a joke nevertheless. Anyhow, so what also was somewhat disconcerting about the King James Version, his story was when he was addressed by the council about his affair, I think it was with George, yes, George Villiers, the love of his life, his true love. Most individuals may not be aware that what King James said was somewhat uh, concerning, if I may say. So history had it that King James wrote a letter back to the Council of, I think it was the Council of England, hopefully that is correct, in 1617, I think it was 1617, King James responded to the Council of England because they wanted to find out how factual it was of him being gay and having an affair with the Duke of Buckingham, again, George Villiers. And his response was amazing because King James the first responded and he said that actually you guys can look it up, find the documents, it's online, it's free, you can look it up. King James said that he cannot be blamed for his choice of lovers because Jesus himself was gay. Yes, you heard me right. King James the first said Jesus was gay. He did not say it in so many words, but what he said was that he cannot be blamed for his sexual preferences because Jesus too had sexual preferences and Jesus had James, and he had George. And for those who might not be aware, James, I think, was Jesus' beloved, and that is what King James was talking about. And he was comparing himself to Jesus having a beloved male partner. So he should be able to have a beloved male partner as well. So again, that is just some facts to start the Bible off with some information that you may not be aware of. And most people may not be aware of this. However, again, you would have pastors, ministers, and preachers condemning homosexuals because of their sexual preferences. But they would never, ever in a million years choose to look at this fact that the person or the book that they hold with such admiration, the founder of this book, was a homosexual. Which also brings me to another few facts in reference to the Bible, in reference to homosexuality. The Bible mentioned homosexuality in many references, but let me get back to this homosexuality in reference to pastors, priests, and pastors, not so much as priests, but pastors, ministers, and other clergy members. This is just an example of the dogmatic behavior in the religious community, because despite the fact this being evidence, they would stick their head in the sand and they would totally deny this as being factual when this is actual documented throughout history. And if you were to go to your pastor or your minister or your bishop or whoever the case may be, and you ask them about this, in most cases they would deny. And that is something that should not be covered up, or someone should stick their head in the sand, because this is an historic fact that, again, King James I was gay. So again, back to the scriptures, we have a few references to homosexuality, and even those references to homosexuality is a big debate. Some scholars would deny and say that no, we're not talking about homosexuality. No, the Bible is not condoning or admitting to homosexuality being a natural act. No, no, no. Because again, these are the dogmatic ministers and pastors and preachers that I'm talking about, who basically supposedly has the love of God in their hearts for all humanity and all mankind, but they will easily condemn you to death if they have a choice. And I would like to say also, most individuals, most of us should thank God. We should thank God that our pastors and our ministers and our higher religious figures are not God, because many of us will never ever enter the kingdom of heaven. For one reason or another, we will be denied. Even as simple as if you did not pay your tithes, most pastors will tell you you will not get a pass into the kingdom of heaven. Which also brings me to another fact, that even tithes is something, this is a topic, side tangent, but even tithes is something that is misunderstood, and they took the information and to make it a financial beneficial situation for the church. Because from an esoteric perspective, the word tithes, when they're talking about tithes, they're talking about 10% of the mind. Giving 10% of the mind back to God is what tithes is all about. We're not talking about 10% financial, but again, this is esoteric teachings. And for those who don't understand, there's a difference between esoteric, mesoteric, and exoteric knowledge. Please go back and watch one of my other videos. I go into great details. I think that was Will Wet Dreams Ever Stop? I talk about that with the sacred secretion. So this information I'm giving you guys now is what we considered to be esoteric knowledge. Basically, only a few, and a few of the masses would have this access to this information that I'm talking about in reference to tithes not being a financial situation. It is more of a mental situation, because like we all have heard before, we only use 10% of the brain, and the other 90% is pretty much dormant or unused. So this 10% that they're talking about the brain is what tithes was really all about. giving the 10% of the carnal mind to Christ, to Joshua, Yesus, consciousness, whatever you want to say. That is what the 10% really originally represented in the ancient esoteric teachings and knowledge. However, it was translated by greed, out of greed, to get financial gain from individuals, to give, for individuals to give 10% of their livelihood, 10% of their salary back then, 10% of whatever corn, greens, whatever individuals had at the time who did not have any money, they still contributed 10% of their harvest or whatever the situation may be. But again, once again, for the last time, the 10% was originally talking about giving 10% of the mind. The 10% was meant to be giving 10% of the carnal mind, the left brain, to the spirit man, sacrificing the 10% of the fleshly mind to the spirit. And that is what the 10% was all about. So back to the reference to gays being mentioned, homosexuals being mentioned in the Bible, but however, because of dogmatic ministers and preachers and pastors, this information has also been suppressed and somewhat denied as well. So we have something in the Bible when you see scriptures talking about eunuchs. Eunuchs, those were individuals there. The Bible said there were three types of eunuchs. I can't remember exactly where the scriptures are. I think somewhere in Matthew, but I'm not here to actually quote scriptures. I'm just giving some facts. So again, eunuchs were individuals who were of service to the palace, and usually they would be in charge of watching harems, women, and so forth and so on. They would do other tasks, but the Bible said there were three types of eunuchs. Three types of eunuchs. One type of eunuch being what they would consider to be a natural eunuch or a eunuch from birth. And then they would have someone what they would also call a eunuch from man, a eunuch that was made, and that eunuch was someone who basically would have been, who have gotten maybe a surgery and gotten their testicles or their penis, something removed of the male organ that would render them pretty much dysfunctional to have kids or even sexual activities as well, because obviously the king did not want individuals to be sexually active with his harem, and most likely the possibility of the eunuchs getting one of the king's harem women in the harem pregnant. That was something that they tried to avoid, so they would just castrate these men so they would not have the ability to have sex. And then they said that the third type of eunuch, there was a eunuch who pretty much sacrificed their sexual life and devote themselves to having a celibate life for the kingdom of heaven. And those would be considered, uh, monks, uh, priests, and nuns. People who devote their life sexually to celibacy and do not have sexual acts. Again, you have nuns, priests, monks, and so forth who practice celibacy. And as we all know by now, you can go back and watch my video, how I got the name Triple P, Pimp, Prophet, and Priest. That is also me talking about my celibate history, because most individuals might not be aware. I do promote celibacy, and I have been celibate now over 6 years, going on 7 years straight. No masturbation. I practice no fap, no masturbation, semen retention. It's the conservation or the holding or retaining semen or sperm, if I may say, and also brahmacharya, which includes celibacy and having some devotional life into spiritual awareness, if I may say. So I do, they call me again Triple P, uh, Pimp, Prophet, and Priest. So I too practice and promote celibacy in the sense that it would be beneficial for the spiritual mind, body, and soul. So again, the Bible talks about these eunuchs, and some pastors would say that the natural eunuch, again, because we have dogmatic individuals who tend to reject facts, and Jesus himself said that there were eunuchs that were born this way from birth, meaning that they were born homosexual or they were born uh, having a sexual preference for the opposite sex. So, but some pastors would say, no, this is not true. What they are talking about is someone who was castrated. And if they were castrated or they had some type of surgery, this would be considered unnatural eunuch. And that's what they would be talking about. There are many, many scriptures in reference to homosexuality throughout the Bible, and there are three main major categories that they were considered to be uh, uh, eunuchs. Again, there are the natural eunuchs. A natural eunuch was an individual who was born uh, in such a, some scholars would say they're not talking about gays, they're not referring to gays, and then some scholars would say yes, they are talking about homosexuals. But again, the scholars who do not want to accept the fact that they are talking about gays, Jesus Christos, Yahshua himself said that let those who hear, let them accept. So basically, if you could accept this as being a fact, a truth, that homosexuals were born that way, let them accept it. And for those who do not, those who do not accept it, they will not. So again, so we have the sexual preference of eunuchs being a natural eunuch who does not have a desire at all to have sex with the female. And then you have eunuchs that were made, which were the eunuchs who went and they did some type of surgery and they got castrated or something of that sort. And usually those eunuchs were eunuchs, slaves who the masters did this, I guess, without their will. I guess they did not have a choice. The masters just basically castrated them because they were slaves. And then again, like I said, they have the eunuchs who have devoted their lives to God and they practice celibacy and they just do this in the name of the kingdom of heaven. And they, therefore, again, monks, pastors, priests, and so forth, and nuns or individuals who usually practice celibacy in the name of God. But again, once again, the Bible has mentioned eunuchs as being a natural phenomenon, whereas men or women, per se, was born that way. And some individuals would say they have a choice, but that is not the case. If you look at, again, from a from a biological perspective, we have we have chemicals. The male produces something called testosterone, and the female produces something called estrogen. And these chemicals are born, they come with the human when the human is born. There's no, you cannot determine how much estrogen. Again, you have females being born with something called estrogen, and we have males being born with something called uh, testosterone. So, and we cannot determine how much estrogen or testosterone each individual will be born with. This is a biological factor. Genetics plays a role. You cannot determine what you have. So, how could you, if testosterone is responsible for masculinity, for males being masculine, and estrogen is responsible for females being feminine, and you do not have any control over this, how could you hold somebody accountable for something that they did not choose? So, in other words, if a male is born with very low testosterone, that individual most likely will be considered very feminine. They would have more feminine traits than masculine traits. So, and also if you have a female has very little estrogen, that female would have very little feminine traits. So you have, that is something beyond our control. So homosexuality is not a choice. It is a biological situation that takes place in the Bible, in the body, that the individuals do not have any control over at all. So I think it is very unfair to hold someone accountable for something that they cannot control biologically. It is like saying you are upset because of your height, your this, your that, your looks, or whatever, and you had no control over that. The only people who had control over that is maybe basically you should blame your parents. If anything, blame your parents, blame your dad for not having any standards, and he just wanted to poke anything that moved, and he didn't care how the female looked. Blame your dad, blame your mom. If anything, if you want to blame somebody for how you look, that's who you should blame. But do not blame, do not say it's a choice. You did not have a choice in the matter at all. So, which is another factor why I think it is very hypocritical for individuals to pretty much reject or disown homosexuals and say that they are not going to make it into heaven or whatever the case may be because it was their choice. And definitely, most definitely, it was never their choice. It was something that they did not choose. If you were a male, I'm just hypothetically speaking, or a female, why would you choose to go against the grind, against the green? I have a few friends right now who I know who I suspect could be sus. I do not know for a fact because we're always out getting females going. At least I used to. When I used to go get females, I used to go and get uh, women by the thousands with these guys. And but however, something was always off. They always had, they always had way too many gay friends, than the average guy. The average guy may know someone who is a gay or homosexual. The average straight guy may know one guy maybe who is gay or homosexual, but the average guy does not know 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 guys who are homosexuals that they actually hang out with. So that would mean that they have so many men that are actually homosexuals, or who they would say, what they would consider to be undercover, and they have wives. Some of these men have wives. Some of these men have children, and some of these men have relationships. They sleep with women in the day and sleep with men at night, and that is nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying that it's obviously that there is a stigma, there is a taboo, there is something negative connected to being a homosexual. That is why individuals would hide their natural inclination to speak out and say that I am this way or I am that. So if why would an individual who naturally has a feelings for males, be it a female having feelings for males, decide to go say, oh, one day I'm just gonna go and have a desire for the same sex for females? No, that is not knowing the consequences, knowing the persecution, knowing what is going to come along with this. Why would anyone choose this at will? No, they will not. Why would a male know that if he is found out to be gay, that would be pretty much, in most cases, the end of him? In most cases, he would be rejected, ridiculed, laughed at, made fun of, made ashamed of, all of these negative things that come along when individuals find out you are gay. Why would a natural, normal human being say that they would choose this punishment and suffering willingly? They will not. That is why most individuals who are homosexuals do not come out and admit this to the world, which is why I'm making this video and saying that there is a lot of hypocrites in the world, especially those in the religious, spiritual culture. I don't want to necessarily point on a particular religion, but again, we are talking about the King James Version Bible. So those who follow that book, we are talking about you. So again, if the King James the first was a homosexual, King James was the first, how come I have never heard, or you have never heard, a pastor, a preacher, or a minister ever in the history of the world speak on this matter? Someone please tell me why this is never ever spoken of, ever in the history of the world. So which brings me to my final point. Again, it is in the Bible. The Bible was promoted and distributed and produced by a homosexual. Jesus himself said it was a natural act, I guess somewhere in Matthew. I can't exactly remember where it was, but you guys could go and check it out. I might put a link somewhere up in the description to say exactly where it is. And again, like I said, there were three types of eunuchs. The natural eunuch that were born homosexuals. Again, some pastors would actually deny this fact and they would say, no, these are not homosexuals. No, they are not. Like I said, most this will be a great debate. Most individuals, modern pastors and ministers would deny the fact that this homosexuality is a natural phenomenon. They would say this is a sinful act and this is of the devil. So again, like I said before, most individuals should thank God that their pastor, their minister is not God, because most of us, many of us, would never enter the kingdom of heaven if it was up to them. So with that being said, I think that I've covered quite a bit of information in reference to some biblical facts and why we should not condemn someone that is naturally the way they are and they have no other choice, because like I said, men with low testosterone will usually be feminine and women with high testosterone will usually be extremely masculine, and vice versa. So, which brings me to, like, again, that hypocrite, that being a hypocrite, that would be like, you know, uh, you know, Andrew Tate. I'm just saying, we know Andrew Tate is one of the most masculine guys there is on the planet. The G, top G. But anyhow, just using Andrew Tate as a reference, I don't know the guy personally, but I'm just thinking of someone who has extremely high testosterone. And so that would be someone, again, like Andrew Tate, being gay in disguise. I'm not saying he's gay, but I'm just giving you an understanding. That is how I consider the church bashing or being against homosexuals and saying that the LGBTQ community will not enter the kingdom of heaven. That is what I call hypocritical. That is what I call the pot calling the kettle black. That is why I use Andrew Tate as an example to say that Andrew Tate would be someone who, if he was gay, the world would be shocked. Or another individual I could think of that comes to mind would be AMS, Alpha Male Strategies. I don't know if you guys watch that guy, but anyhow, I've watched a few of his videos. He's a funny guy. He's a factual guy. He talks a lot of truth too, but I'm just saying he's also another masculine guy that I could think of with high testosterone, extremely, masculine, if I may say, who talks all about the masculine frame, the masculine frame, the masculine frame. So imagine AMS, Alpha Male Strategies, being homosexual on the down low. And again, I am not saying that he's homosexual. I am not saying that would be another extreme example of someone that the pot calling the kettle black, which I dislike. So, which brings me to my final point that I would like to make. That is why, if those who have seen my other video, the video called the Will Where Dreams Ever End, that video I'm talking about the sacred secretion, because I am a practitioner of the sacred secretion, and this is what also I would like to confirm in reference to the sacred secretion, because I promote salvation is attained as a biological process in the body as well. Again, the monthly cycle of the sacred secretion. For those who have not seen the video, go back and watch part. I can't remember what part it is, but the title of the video is called Will Wet Dreams Ever End? And that is what I talk about, the process, the practice of the sacred secretion, and how salvation is obtained, and which is also an esoteric knowledge that was hidden and a best kept secret from the average individual as well. So again, the sacred secretion is a process that happens naturally in the body, whereas if you conserve the seed will go up and there will be a rejuvenation of new blood, activation of dormant brain cells, and the list goes on and on. And this is what the Bible talks about, anointing the oil and the seed and the Christ oil and so forth. The salvation, the death, the burial of Jesus Christ is a biological process in the body that takes place. So that is what I preach and that is what I teach. I do not preach a salvation whereas you are looking for something or someone external to get your redemption. But however, this salvation can be found internally, and that is what I teach and that is what I promote. So, from that perspective, from a sacred secretion perspective, will gays be able to enter the kingdom of heaven also? And that answer is yes, also, because once again, the sacred secretion is a process that takes place in the human body, be it male or female. Every month, a human has the ability to be saved. Every month, a male or female, this process takes place in the human body. This Christ oil descends and rises from the pineal and pituitary gland and goes down to the sacrum area and rises back up. And there's a big transformation that takes place in the octave thalamus. But again, I'm not here to talk about the sacred secretion. So please go ahead and watch that video. The video again is called Will Wet Dreams Ever Stop? And that video is talking a lot about the practice and the process of the sacred secretion in great detail. And I talk about what actually you could expect to happen if you follow these specific requirements that are needed. So again, according to the sacred secretion, everyone is able to enter the kingdom of heaven. Male, female, gays, black, white, brown. Their sexual preference has nothing to do with entering the kingdom of heaven from the sacred secretion perspective. That has nothing to do with your sexual choice. If you have male or female, the same sex choice, you still will be able to be saved. You still will be able to experience the kingdom of heaven within you. You still would be able to experience Christ consciousness, because this process that takes place in the body does not discriminate against anyone, be it straight, gay, crooked, whatever you want to call it. This is not a discrimination practice at all. So once again, so we have three factors so far. So far, I think three or more factors that illustrate that there will never be a discrimination about gays or homosexuals, LGBTQT, entering the kingdom of heaven, because those practices, the practice of sacred secretion, is a biological practice that allows all individuals to enter the kingdom of heaven. So now let's use another biblical reference. I think this is going to be my last point that I'm going to make, because I noticed that my videos are usually very long. It's just that I try to talk as much as I can, to give as much information as I can. You could go and watch the video, break it up, stop, pause, whatever you choose to do, just watch the video. And I thank each and every one of you guys once again for watching the video this long, sticking around, because I know that these videos, again, like I said, are extremely long and it may be difficult to watch in one shot. So again, thank you for watching these videos. For anyone who have stuck around this far, thank you very much, to say the least. So back to the sacred secretion and back to the Bible. And the Bible, I will give you guys another example of how scriptures was misconstrued. There's a scripture, I can't remember where it is, talks about all the individuals who will not enter the kingdom of heaven. And this is where the individuals say that homosexuals will not enter the kingdom of heaven. They are drunkards, thieves, and adulterers, and all of these different lists of individuals who they say will not enter the kingdom of heaven. But I'm specifically talking about homosexuals at the time on that list. And homosexuality is on the list is because, once again, the process to enter the kingdom of heaven is a biological process. It is not, it is the seed being crucified on the 33rd vertebrae of the skull. And that is what we're talking about, the Christ oil being crucified, the Christ seed being crucified, died and resurrected and coming back to life. We're not talking about a physical death, burial, and resurrection of a physical human being. This is the kept secret of the sacred secretion. So again, the sacred secretion, that scripture is talking about those who would not be able to achieve the sacred secretion when they say that homosexuals and those who lie with animals. I'm not saying that you should sleep with animals, by no means, but I'm saying that scripture is talking about the sacred secretion. When they say homosexuals was not enter the kingdom of heaven, they're not talking about physical, real human beings entering the kingdom of heaven. Again, once again, this is esoteric knowledge. This is not exoteric, this is not meso or mesoteric knowledge. This is esoteric knowledge. And when you look at the scriptures from an esoteric perspective, we are talking about positive, negative, male, female parts of the brain, parts of the mind, parts of the psyche, the female aspect of the brain and the male aspect of the brain. This is what they are talking about when they are talking about homosexuality. And we know that everything has polarities. So we're talking about the male mind, the female mind, the moon, the sun, positive, negative, left, right, masculine, feminine energies. That's what we're talking about. And we know that the left brain is considered the male brain. And we know that the right brain is considered the female brain. And so this is what they're talking about, that the intercourse should take place within the left brain and the right brain. And the left brain is usually considered the male brain, and the female part of the brain is considered the right brain. However, most individuals may not be aware that the right brain is also considered the spirit part of the brain. The spirit part of the brain is the right part, and the left part is considered the flesh, the male, masculine, the body is considered the left part of the brain. So I hope you guys are seeing where I'm going with this. Now, again, the intercourse should take place with the left brain and the right brain, the male mind with the spirit mind. That is what they're talking about. So when you hear them talk about homosexuality, they're talking about the male mind intercoursing with the also with the body, with the flesh, with the male, with the carnal mind. That's what they're talking about. They're not talking about two males. They're not talking about man and animal having sex and not entering the kingdom of heaven and being put to death. They are saying that if you do not intercourse the male and the spirit, the left brain and the right brain, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. That is what they're talking about. They're not talking about physical people. So again, you would not hear that from your pastor, because your pastor, your minister, your preacher is taking this all literal. Your pastor, the ministers, and all of these individuals are taking the Bible literal, and they do not understand the esoteric meanings of the scriptures. That is what I do. I teach the esoteric version of the scriptures. And again, like I said, the left brain is the male side of the brain, and the right brain is considered the female side of the brain. The left brain is considered the male aspect, the man aspect, the flesh aspect, the animal aspect of the mind. So when you hear them talking about man should not lay with animals, again, I am not saying that it is okay to lay with any animals or have sex with any animals, but the esoteric teaching is that the left brain, the male mind, should not have intercourse with the flesh, should not be so attached to the carnal mind, the fleshly desires of the body. That is what they're talking about, that the male mind should have intercourse with the female mind, which is the spirit. That is why we see throughout the Bible, we see Jesus talking about him being the bridegroom and him getting married and all that. That is talking about the Christ in you being married to the spiritual female aspect of the mind, the virgin birth, all of that is talking about the virgin mind, the spiritual conscious mind, the clean and pure, unadulterated mind. That is what they are referring to when they are talking about left brain, right brain, homosexuality. It has nothing to do with male, physical males having sex with physical males and physical females having sex with physical females, because this left brain being a male and the right brain being female, this is normal in whether you are male or female. It does not make a difference. Whatever you are, your left brain is considered the male, and your right brain is considered the spiritual female aspect of the mind, of consciousness. So that is one factor that I wanted to also bring to this equation. Hopefully that also helped individuals to understand that the whole homosexuality, the condemnation of homosexuals is simply not true. It is basically men being dogmatic and wanting to project their whatever they are trying to project onto individuals and want to have the whole individuals accountable for something that is biological and they have no control over. So with that being said, I think I've covered pretty much everything that I wanted to cover. A very quick recap. Again, King James I was a homosexual who was the producer, director, and orchestrator of the King James Bible. He had a 14-year relationship with the Duke of Lennox, if I may say, Lennox, Lennox, uh, Esme start his 14-year level, and he truly had a real, this deep love affair with George. Uh, uh, what's the name of the guy? George Villiers, correct. George Villiers, uh, again, the first Duke of Buckingham. So, and then we have the scriptures talking about eunuchs being homosexuals, being natural, but that also too is denied by some pastors. They would say homosexuals, they are talking about men that had some type of physical defect, maybe their scrotum or something didn't really work out naturally, something didn't, something naturally was defected in the male physical sexual organ, but that is not the case. And then we have the last factor again, the sacred secretion, the Bible talking about homosexuality, male, and female is literally talking about the mind. The male mind intercoursing with the female mind is the most natural intercourse. You cannot have the male mind intercoursing with the flesh, the male mind, and we know that men, the human biologically we are called animals. So that is also why they say man should not live with animals. We're talking about making love to the carnal, fleshly mind and desires as well. So with that being said, I'm going to end this video. It's been a very long video, but I hope my point was being made. And again, once again, thank you guys very, very much for watching this channel and watching and sticking around this long. Again, this is an astrology channel, and all of these things are related. I'm just giving you guys a very, very brief idea about me and some other facts before I get much deeper into astrology as well. So I think I'm going to bring this video to a close. Again, like I said, I think I've covered pretty much all grounds in defense of homosexuality, and despite the fact being a heterosexual male. I just, again, like I said, I do not like to see the pot calling the kettle black as well. So on that note, I would like to end on an astrological note as usual. And may the stars shine brightly on you always. And may the planets work in your favor always as well. Triple P, and I'm out. Oh.